Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a really long time. My name is Brandy. If you're new here, I love reading. I love teaching my kids to read. I have a whole list of great books from 2024 that I read. I will say off the jump, I am not a person who is on social media. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I live a pretty low-key life. I have 4 kids. I just love to read. And so I want to share some of my favorite books from last year with you guys. I love literary fiction. If you love drama and Wahala, if you love following messy characters, then you'll probably love literary fiction. Literary fiction is basically just character-focused books. So the first book that I read last year that I loved was called, and I'm going to be looking off a little bit if you see me, it's called Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. This is a British book. I absolutely loved it. It's about Iona Iverson, who basically is an editor, I believe. This was like January of last year that I read this, so please forgive me if I get some facts wrong on this, but it was like a warm hug of a book. I loved it. It is following this woman and her daily commute on a commuter train and how her life begins to intersect with the other people who are on this train. The book is not like a solo journey type book. It's really following these characters throughout their daily lives. Iona herself is kind of on up in age, and she has started to feel a little bit irrelevant in her work. And I won't give too much away because I don't want to spoil the book, but the book was absolutely so funny. I laughed, I cried. I really enjoyed following these characters. And sometimes what I love is when we can look at a character's life and it feels so relatable to our own, even if we are not ourselves middle age or ourselves in the editing industry. I felt like I really very much related to the struggles of these characters. And I love how it followed multiple different perspectives. So we have the guy who everybody thinks is super rich on the train, who in reality is having some serious money troubles. I won't go into their individual lives, but I will say that this book was really highly entertaining, and I highly recommend that you pick it up. The next book I want to talk about is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I absolutely loved this book. So one of the very first things that you're told is that this book is following Lydia, and she is the favorite child of James Lee, and her mother, I think, is Sarah Lee. I may be making that up. But she is their favorite child. She is the one that everything is hinging on in terms of their legacy. And the very first thing you find out is that she's dead. And you have no idea why she's dead or what has happened. Her brother also has these unwanted expectations placed upon him by his father. His father sees so much of himself in his son. You see generational trauma, how expectations that were placed upon him as an immigrant to assimilate and all of those things begin to play out in his own fatherhood journey, in the way that he interacts with his own children and the way that he put pressure on his children to be a certain way, act a certain way, look a certain way, and prioritize certain things as they assimilate into American society, and the devastating consequences that come from placing that kind of pressure on your children. It was so poetically written that I felt that I was right there. So I highly recommend that you guys check out Everything I Never Told You. It definitely kept me hooked from the beginning. This next book I'm going to talk about is one that I haven't seen anybody else talk about. I know that in Booktube land, Stephen King is kind of taboo for his problematic characters. What I want to relay about that is that what I love about Stephen King is that he writes authentically. He's not afraid whatsoever to put some problematic characters. And guess what? We live in a world with problematic people. The real world is that people are crazy. And he writes crazy characters. So I love Stephen King. I think that he is the GOAT. I think that he has a wonderful following for a reason. I know a lot of people do not like Stephen King, but I say if you don't like Stephen King based off of listening to other booktubers and you yourself have never read Stephen King, then I would say give it a shot. You never know what you like. It's just like broccoli with cheese. You never know. It might stink, it might look ugly, but when you try it, it's good, okay? So that's my feelings on Stephen King, and I feel like a lot of times we can get into this group think without actually giving ourselves the credence and the credibility to speak for ourselves and to say what we like and what we do not like. So anyway, this is a Stephen King book. It's called Elevation. It's actually a novella. It's very short. It is the craziest It is the craziest book I've ever read. It is not a horror. He actually has quite a few books that are not at all what I would consider to be horror. I guess you could say that perhaps this is body horror, but there's absolutely no gruesome details. There's no gore, so I wouldn't even consider it a body horror. I just think this is a really strange book. We're following this man who has a strange medical condition, and we don't know the entire book, most of the book, what in the world is wrong with this man. There is something wrong with him that I can guarantee you have never experienced and no one you know has ever experienced. I'm not going to give anything away about this book because the book is super short. And so you need to go check this book out from the library. We follow him. The plot is interesting. It will grip you. And between reading sessions, I found that I just couldn't stop thinking about this book. And it was like a movie put on pause in my brain. I wanted to know what was wrong with this guy, how did it come to be, and what the end result was going to be. I found the ending to be very interesting and somewhat comical in a way, but also a little bit devastating. You just have to go read it. It's truly a work of creative genius. And honestly, this man is solitary. He's on his own. He does not have a family. And you follow him with this medical condition that has confounded the medical community. And I will leave it at that. Go read the blurb. Go check it out from your library. It's probably there, and it's definitely worth a read. Okay, now we're getting on up into a timeline of books where I actually remember the characters a little bit better. This next book is called More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez. And this book was fantastic. I actually listened to the audio of this book. So we're following Lore in this book. Lore is a woman who is kind of in the midst of a marriage that is neither here nor there. It's not a terrible marriage, but she finds herself actually tripping almost accidentally headlong into a double life. And this is on the blurb, so I'm not giving too much away, but basically this double life is where she engages in a passionate affair with another man. Now, I am not a romance girly. I certainly am not a romance girly in any way. I married my high school sweetheart. I love romance. I love love. However, it's just not something I gravitate to. I love the messiness of a good story. This is an absolutely fantastic story that I hear nobody talking about at all. And it's a wonderful work of literary fiction because we're following these characters and the turmoil that they feel, their inner struggles, their inner dialogue. And basically this woman who ends up with a completely double life almost by accident and loving two men at the same time. It is such a wild ride. I highly recommend you put it on your bookshelf. It's one that I don't hear anybody talking about, but it is a good one. The next two books are actually a pair of books. They're a series called The Road. The first one is called The Road to Dalton, and the second one is called Where the Forest Meets the River. And in both books, we are following a small town, Dalton, and a cast of characters, maybe 5 or 6 characters, as they navigate life. In the first book, The Road to Dalton, there is a tragedy that takes place in the book, and we watch as the town pretty much falls to pieces from this tragedy. And I love the character development in this book. Every single character is very well fleshed out. It is a book that will grab you by the heartstrings. It will make you cry. It will make you laugh. You will grow to love the characters. And when you read the last page, you'll think, I just wish I could stay in Dalton with these characters a little while longer. And then you'll remember I said that there is a sequel, and the sequel is Where the Forest Meets the River. Both of these are by Shannon Bowring, if I didn't say that already. And so you are still following the main characters from the first book, though. So you still get some follow-up, some closure on it, and you continue to just follow these same characters in their lives, although some of the side characters are highlighted a little bit more in the second book. I loved spending more time with Dalton, and it is a warm, cozy book, but it's also a book full of action. I know a lot of literary fiction can be very meandering. There are a lot of landscape descriptions. There are a lot of simile and metaphor and symbolism that you can pay attention to, that you can really kind of sink your mind into, but it's not hard to understand in any way, and the characters really come to life. So I just recommend that you look into it. I want to highlight one 5-star book that I read last year with my children. Please don't click off the video. This will be super quick. It was called A Lion to Guard Us, and it is a children's book set during the 1620s. The book is about 3 children who are basically, their father leaves to go to the New World. They are left in England with their mother. Their mother gets sick. Something happens to her, and they have to make the tough decision to go to the New World by themselves. This is such an easy read. I would say elementary to middle school read. Wonderful to read to 6, 7, 8-year-olds as a way to talk about some of those early settlers that came to America, and my children enjoyed it so thoroughly. If you have a child in your life, I recommend A Lion to Guard Us. It's a very short book. It's historical fiction. It follows these characters very closely. I would say it's literary fiction, and even an adult could enjoy this, so highly recommend. So this next book is about a book called Liars. It's by Sarah Manguso. You may have heard of it before. And it follows Jane and John in their 14-year spiral of their marriage. So it basically is Jane highlighting every single grievance that John has ever perpetrated against her. His awful, disingenuous attitude and behavior towards her. The book is simmering and boiling with rage. Rage that I think any wife and mother would probably be able to relate to. Some points you feel like she's being a little bit too harsh on John, but in many instances you feel like, yeah, I can relate to this. So if you're looking for a book that centers themes around female rage, just misogyny, things like that, feminism, I think that you would probably enjoy this book. It was definitely a good one. The next 5-star book that I would say that I read in 2024 is called Margot's Got Money Trouble by Rufi Thorpe. It follows Margot, who is a young woman who has gone to college and begun a illicit relationship with her married professor, and everything that ensues after that. It's really a good character study in what it was like when you were young, when you make poor decisions, becoming a mother for the first time, but also all of the just irrational and shady things that Margot gets up to and she ends up making an OnlyFans account to help pay for her life as a new mom, and also her WWE stepfather moves into the home, and it's just a wild, crazy ride. But I will say that the language in the book is very readable. It's a very easy book to read. I laughed a lot while reading this book. It was really crazy, and I empathized a lot with Margot in her situation, just imagining what I would have been like as a single teenage, basically mother, trying to survive in 2024, 2023, the way prices are, the way things are. I highly recommend that you read this book. It is an excellent work of, I believe, literary fiction. The last book that I'm going to recommend is a book called The Paying Guest, and it is by Sarah Waters. This book is not a new book. This book has been around for years and years and years. It's set in the 1920s at a time when many people are grappling with major changes to life. We've had World War I, and many of the ruling class and the wealthy elites in British society have basically gone down in their stature in society. So The Paying Guest tells the story of Frances, who lives with her mother in an old, basically crumbling manor in Britain during the 1920s. And they can no longer afford to keep their house up ever since her father died, who she does not have a good relationship with. They cannot afford to keep the house up. So they have to pretty much put tenants in their house, or basically lease out some rooms in their home to continue to keep the home. And in come Mr. and Mrs. Barber, who seem on the surface to be perfectly nice tenants at first. And we see slowly over time how Mrs. Barber and Frances's relationship unfolds. This is a story that was absolutely, totally gripping from start to finish. You have to read this book, okay? At first, you're going to be like, okay, British, this is a little bit boring. Like, what's going on? We're looking at this house and these people are showing up. This doesn't seem very interesting. Keep going. It gets so good. The book has murder, it has a trial, it has romance. There are some relationships that ensue. I don't want to give it away too much. There are some relationships that ensue that you would never expect. There's lots of twists and turns. And it's basically a character study that basically examines desire, our abilities to suppress our own desires in love or care for someone else. Longing is explored. Status and our where we fit in society, how we are perceived by others, and how we perceive ourselves. There are just so many good themes in this book, and the book has, for a literary fiction book, it has actually quite a lot of really, really good plot. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This video is long enough, but those were my top picks for 2024 in terms of the literary fiction books that I read. I also have some other 5-star reads. If you're interested, please leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to share them with you. Add these books to your TBR. Let me know. Have you already read these books? Are these on your TBR? Like, what's the situation? I've already gotten into January reading some really good books. I've already read 2 5-star books in January. Let me know if you want to hear about those books. So like this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.